what's up everyone? Welcome back to Babylon Talmud. Today we're studying Daf Tesvav of Masechta Ayruvin, Daf 15. Cool daf. The first daf maybe is a little bit more involved than the second one, but nothing we can't handle, especially at this point. Let's do a quick overview. So the first daf primarily deals with the sugya of what's called Lechi Omed Me'elav, a lechi that stands on its own. So, right? It's just, you didn't put it there as a lechi, it's just there. So can you memela use it as a lechi? So that's, we're going to see a machlokas Abaye v'Rava Dartin. What's interesting about this machlokas in Abaye and Rava is that generally we paskin like Rava. However, there are 6 exceptions, what's called Ya'al Kigam. Now the Lamed in Ya'al Kigam stands for Lechia Omed Me'elav, which is interesting. So we paskin like Abaye here. We talk about using a live animal as a lechi. Can you do it? What if you really want to? Does that make a difference? No, it doesn't. But we'll see the machlokas there. Writing a get on a live animal. What if you wanted to get creative with your divorce document and write it on the side of a cow? Can you do that? Then we finally get into definition of a wall, right? This has obviously been coming up throughout Masechta Ayruvin so far, in terms of what are the requirements for a proper wall, Pesach versus Pirza. There will be a Mishnah on Tesvav Mud Beis that gets into that. And finally we end up with the machlokas regarding what happens when the spaces in a wall are exactly equal to the amount of standing sections in a wall. Then what happens, friends? Tesvav Mud Aleph, all the way at the top, Mamish, first word on the page. Itmar, it was stated, Lechia Omed Me'elav. What if you have a lechi that's just kind of there on its own? Now, I don't know, in my mind I was thinking almost maybe like, let's say like a plumbing pipe or something, right? Let's say you have like some kind of pipe that's just kind of coming down the side of the mavui wall or something. Maybe that can work. It's just kind of there. It's not exactly a lechi, it's just there, but may as well repurpose it. Although at the end of the daf, there's actually an interesting story where there's a mavui, where there was like a beam from a porch. There was like a porch, I guess, overhanging over there. There was a beam from the porch, and that was just in the perfect spot to make a lechi, right? So something like this, right? A type of situation where you have something that could qualify as a lechi, and it's just there already. Do you have to build a new lechi, or can you repurpose this? That is the question. Abaye Amar have lechi, Rava Amar lo have lechi. Abaye says that this is fine. It works as a lechi. Rava says it doesn't work as a lechi. You have to build your own proper lechi. You can't use this. Now says the Gemara, so where we were unable to rely upon this lechi from before Shabbos, everyone agrees it's not a lechi. What does that mean? That means if let's say you had a lechi already, right? Let's say you had this beam from the porch, which maybe, which is just in the right place, right? You have this beam from the porch in the right place, but you're not using that beam from the porch as a lechi. You build another lechi. And that way you know for sure that you have a good lechi, because you built a lechi dedicated for this purpose to be a lechi. But that lechi falls down on Shabbos. So now the lechi that you built to be a lechi is gone. But what about this beam? Can we now fall back to this beam from the porch that's supporting the porch to be a lechi? So everyone agrees that the answer is no. If when Shabbos started, this was not your lechi, so then if your lechi falls down, you can't default to this beam. Even Abaye would agree with that. Ki plige, the machlokas between Abaye and Rava, is heichi de samchinon ale me'esmo. It's when Shabbos started, this was your lechi. Ki'ilu, there was no other lechi. When Shabbos started, this mavui had one lechi, and that lechi is this beam of somebody's porch. Abaye says, that's fine. That can be your lechi. Rava says, that's not fine. You can't use the supporting beam of a porch as a lechi. You have to have a dedicated lechi. That is the machlokes between Abaye and Rava. Now, so Abaye have a lechi. Abaye Amar have a lechi. Abaye says that if when Shabbos started, the only show in town was this supporting beam from the porch, so then that's fine, because when Shabbos started, that was your lechi. Rava Amar lo ave lechi. Rava says it doesn't work as a lechi, because since when that beam was put in that perfect lechi spot, it wasn't put there as a lechi, it was completely 100% put there to support a porch. So therefore, you cannot use it as a lechi, even if when Shabbos started that's what was there. It makes no difference. That beam was not constructed to be a lechi, it was constructed to hold up somebody's porch. So you cannot use it as a lechi. That is the machlokas between Abaye and Rava regarding lechi ha'omed me'eleh, a lechi that was just kind of there memela, but not put there for the purpose of being a lechi. Now friends, listen to this. Says the Gemara, Kasaka daitech ke'echi de pligi belechi pliginami b'mechitza. Now, this next line is the key to pretty much the remainder of the page. That our hava amina right now is to assume that the same machlokas when it comes to lechi would apply in the same way to a mechitza. Meaning, that just like Abaye says that when it comes to, just like when it comes to the sugya of lechi ha'omed me'elav, a lechi that was just already there, even though it wasn't there for being a lechi, it just was there. And the question is, can we use it as a lechi? Abaye says, yes, you can. Rava says, no, you cannot. Let's say that this same machlokas will apply to walls, to partitions. In cases where I need a wall, as we're going to see in a number of cases right now, that there are cases when I need a wall for something, whether it's for a sukkah, whether it's for, just having a mechitza for Shabbos, to make Rosh Hashanah, to be able to carry, whatever it is. In places where I need a wall, so let's say the wall was already there memela. I didn't construct it for this purpose. It was just happened to already be there. So let's say that the same machlokas would apply there. Abaye would say, use that wall. It's fine. No problem. Rava would say, you can't use it since it was not constructed in order to be, right, with the purpose of being for being a wall for that purpose. Fine. So it says the Gemara, so the Gemara says that it enters your mind to say that just like there's machlokas between Abaye and Rava regarding a lechi, the same machlokas would be regarding walls. Now, pretty much for the remainder of the page, we're going to bring up different cases that are going to pose a question for Rava based on different halachas by mechitza. So Tashma, here's the first of these cases. What if a person constructs a sukkah? Now obviously a sukkah needs to have a certain amount of walls. That number is 3. It has to have 3 walls. So what if you basically just find some trees that are perfectly, positioned next to each other, and you say, hey, look, these trees can be the walls of my sukkah. Kshera. That's a good sukkah. Now, you just found these trees there. These trees weren't put there in order to be your wall. They were just there already. And we're saying that it's a good sukkah. And if we're assuming that the machlokas between Abaye and Rava by lechi is the same as by mechitza, which means that Rava would say that a mechitza ha'omed me'elav, a mechitza, or me'eleh, I guess, a mechitza that's just there already, you can't use. Well, then what does he do with this Mishnah that seems to be saying that for a sukkah, you can just kind of use these trees that you found there? So the Gemara answers, well, those trees, you didn't just find them there. You actually planted them there to be your trees. And that is why they can work for your sukkah, because they're not mechitzos ha'omdos me'elein. They are actually mechitzos that were put there in order to be your walls of your sukkah. If that's the case, then obviously you can use them. You constructed walls. Why shouldn't you be able to use them? So my answer is, well, I might think that even though you planted these trees so that you can have them as your walls, still you wouldn't be able to use them because we'd be concerned that maybe you'll end up using the tree. So Kamash Malan, that we're not concerned that you use the tree, and as long as you planted them to be your walls, then you can use them as walls according to Rava. Okay? But, based on this logic, though, Abaye would seem to say that there's no problem. If you just find them there, you can use them. Okay, Tashma, another case that we're going to use to bring a kasha against Rava. Hayasham ilan o gader o chitzas akanim nidon mishum diomed. No, it's come up a few times already. This pasei beiraos, right? You had this well that was in the middle of Rosh Hashanah that the people who were traveling to Jerusalem for the holidays, they would have a place to be able to get water for themselves, for their animals. And that well is 10 tefachim deep and 4 tefachim by 4 tefachim wide, so it's a Rishus HaYachid. Therefore, you would be unable to take water from the well and then take it out to you in Rishus HaRabim. And therefore, they made this very interesting thing called Pasei Beiros, which is you can just have like these L-shaped things making 4 corners around this well, and the entire space between these 4 L shapes is gap. Okay, so it's paras mubala omid, but you have these 4 corners, and you have 1 amma of wall. Right, each side of the L is 1 amma, so basically each corner has an amma in each direction, and these are pasei beiros. Okay, so what happens if these pasei beiros were just there memela, right? Hayasham, there was over there ilan, there was a tree that can serve as this diumad. The dio means 2, right? And omed is, I guess, standing. So if this like L shape, which has kind of these small walls in each direction, so if this if this tree was there, or gader, or some kind of a fence, or chitzas akanim, or reeds that are very close to each other, nidon mishum diomed, you can use them for your diomed. So what do we see? That these diomeds are like a type of mechitza, and we're saying if you just kind of found them there, you can use them. So achanami b'mayaskinon. So Rava is going to respond here as well. No, you didn't just happen to find these there. You had put them there intentionally for this purpose, and that's why you can use them. Well, then what's the chiddush? What, you basically created diomdin? Like, obviously that works. The chiddush would be if you just kind of found them there and you can still use them. So kamashmalan chitzas akanim konekone pachos mishlosh tefachim. So the chiddush is, apparently there's some question that Abaye asks Rabba on Daf Yud Tes Amud Beis, that we're going to get to in a few days, regarding when you have these reeds that are within 3 tefachim of each other, in terms of lavud, can you use them for this pasei beiros? So I guess the chiddush was regarding that question, but nonetheless, Rava would assert that we're talking about trees and reeds and things like that you put there specifically to be used for the pasei beiros. Okay, Tashma, come in here. Ilan hamasich ala aretz. Okay, let's say you have a tree and its branches are hanging over the land. They're kind of drooping down to the ground. So as long as these droopy branches reach down to within 3 tefachim of the ground, so then we can consider them as being proper walls, and you can actually carry under this tree as though it were Rishus HaYachid. So here also, what do we see? Here are these branches that are just kind of there, and we're using them as walls. So nami b'mayaskinan, here also, what are we talking about? Sh'neto mitchila lechach. No, you specifically planted this tree so that you'll have walls and you'll have a Rishus HaYachid, and that's why you can use it. But then the Gemara asks a very interesting question. Ihachi, but if that's the case, that you planted them intentionally to be this Rishus HaYachid, well then litalto b'chula, then you should be able to carry as much as you'd like under this tree. Allah ma'amar Rav Huna Breder of Yoshua. Why did Rav Huna Breder of Yoshua say, that you can only carry up to a beis asayim? What does that mean? So if that's the case, that this tree was specifically planted there so that you'd be able to carry under there, well then how come Rav Huna Breder of Yeshua says that you can only carry in that space up to a beis asayim, up to that's basically about 5,000 square amos? the question is, so what does this mean? So this means that basically, if you have a space that's enclosed, that has a wall around it, however, it's not enclosed for residential space to like live in it, because you want to create a space to live in. It's non-residential space that is surrounded by walls. So you can only carry up to 5,000 square amos over there. And Rav Huna, brother of Yeshua, says that in this case, when you have this tree that its branches droop down to within 3 tvachim, this qualifies as the kind of a space that you would only be able to carry up to a beis sa'asayim. Now, 5,000 square amos seems quite large for a tree, but I guess nonetheless this would qualify as something that would be considered non-residential space, that even though it's surrounded by walls, you would only be able to carry up to 5,000 square amos. Now, the question is, if what Rav is saying that the reason why you're allowed to carry under these branches is because the tree was specifically planted to be a Rishus HaYachid for you. Now, if that's the case, then why are you limited to a beis sa'asayim? It's ledira. It's for a residential space. It's for using. It's for inhabiting, and therefore, why should there be any limit? So that's the kasha on Rava. So the Gemara answers, Mishum la'ave dira shetashmish la'avir v'choder shetashmish la'avir emitaltalim ba'ele beis sa'asayim. The answer is because this structure, you know why you planted it? You didn't plant it because you're looking for like a getaway. If you're looking for because you want this space. The reason why this tree was planted was because the people guarding the fields, watching the fields, it's very sunny out. And because it's very sunny out, so like, they need some shade, and that's why you planted it. Meaning, in an ideal world, you wouldn't need this tree. You wouldn't need these branches. You wouldn't need this kind of place to hide away from the sun. If it was perfect weather, then you wouldn't need these trees. Right? Kilu, this tree was only planted not because you specifically want the tree, because you specifically want this space. It's only because it's so darn hot outside that without this space you'd be in big trouble. So you put some trees over there so that they'll have somewhere to go. That's what's called a dira shetashmisha la'avir, an inhabited space that was built really only because of the outer elements, only to save people from, let's say, the sun in this case. So in that case, in this situation, a dira shetashmisha la'avir, even though, yeah, sure, it's made for inhabiting, and Rava would say that because it was made with the intention of being used as a Rishus HaYachid, in order to go in because it's too hot outside, so that's why you can carry there. But nonetheless, you'll only be able to carry up to a beis sa'asayim, because after all, this is the kind of thing that is only made to protect you from the elements, not really because you want this as like living space. Fine. So far Rav has been able to defend his position, which we're assuming is that when it comes to mechitza, he would hold that you would only be able, it would only count as a wall if it was built specifically with the intention of being a wall. Now this is about to change. Tashma, come in here. Shavas betel shugavoa asara. Okay, if a person was hanging out on Shabbos on a mound, on like a big kind of hill that was 10 tfachim tall, and its width is from 4 ames until beis sa'asayim, until about 5,000 square amos. So basically it's a Rishus HaYachid. Right? Why does it say 4 ames as opposed to 4 tfachim? Rashi says because we're talking about kilo, how far you can walk, and that's really only relevant in terms of 4 amos, whatever it is. But here we're talking about something from 4 amos to a beis sa'asayim. But I mean, it would still be Rishus HaYachid even if it was 4 tfachim by 4 tfachim. V'chein beneka shu amok asara. Similarly, if you have like, I don't know, an area dug out in the ground, well, not dug out in the ground, but like a cleft, something that's naturally 10 tfachim deep, and it's as large as from 4 ames until a beis sa'asayim. Basically, a rishus, you're spending Shabbos in this Rishus HaYachid. V'kama ktsura, or you have harvested grain, v'shibolos makifos osa. Now, around the harvested area, you have standing grain, right? So let's say you're harvesting, you start, let's say, in the middle of the field, and you harvested a whole bunch of grain. But surrounding the area where you harvested, there's unharvested grain, which is still standing, and they're at least 10 tfachim tall. So that's where you're spending Shabbos. It's kilo, that's where you're spending Shabbos. And if that's where you're spending Shabbos, you can walk in that entire space. You can walk in that entire space, and outside of it, you can go an additional 2,000 amas. Right, as long as it's what? Me arba amis vad beis sa'asayim. As long as it's between 4 amis and, beis sa'asayim, because I guess it's a non-residential space, right? It's just this kind of like hole in the rock, or this little hill. So, what do we see? So here's this space, this little hill, or this hole in the rock. And we say that it works as a mechitza for Shabbos, to allow you to carry there throughout Shabbos. And if you're going to say, yeah, but this is also talking about where you made these walls intentionally. So bishlama kama lechaye, fine, I can understand that when it comes to this grain. Okay, so you kind of, harvested certain grain, and, it was part of the plan that this standing grain was going to be your walls. But elatel v'neka ma'ikal meimar. But this hill, what did he make this hill? This cleft in the rock? The cleft in the rock, right, the hole in the rock was always there. So here we're talking about clearly where you have these walls, since the hill is 10 tfachim tall at least, and this, breach in the rock is 10 tfachim deep. And these were there on their own. And we're saying that these are good mechitzas, and you can carry in there on Shabbos. So what are you going to say? Okay. This hava mina that we had, towards the top of the page, to say that the machlokes that Abaye and Rava have by Lechi is the same machlokes by mechitza, not true. There's machlokes by Lechi. Abaye says Lechi omid me'elav is mutter. Rava says it's aser. However, they do not, that machlokes does not apply to mechitzos. Rather, everyone agrees that a mechitza omid me'elav is a good mechitza, and that's why you can carry on this hill and in this area in the rock. And mistama, if we go back to the other examples, mistama, that's why you can use those trees as the walls of a sukkah, because ki'ilu, a mechitza that's just there on its own, it's fine. That's a good mechitza. Ki plige belechi. The machlokas is only when it comes to lechi. And friends, what is the machlokas based on? Abaye l'taimid amar lechi mishum mechitza, u'mechitza asur yimeleh avi mechitza. Abaye learns that lechi, and he's in good company. We said the other day that Rabbah also agrees this way, and so does Rav Yehuda, that a lechi is about mechitza. And as we just said, everyone agrees that a mechitza omid me'eleh is fine. So Abaye says that lechi is about mechitza, and therefore, if you have this lechi that is just there on its own, this beam of somebody's porch, so that would be a fine lechi. Whereas v'rava l'time, as Rava said the other day, where was this? On Yud Gimel Amud Beis, or Yud Beis Amud Beis? Yeah, Yud Beis Amud Beis. Rava says, to Amar lechi mishum heker. Whereas Rava says that lechi is about a heker. It's about having something to remind you, like, hey, don't carry in Rosh Hashanah. So therefore, yavida biyadayim av yeheker, v'lo lo av yeheker. Therefore, if you make this lechi to be a lechi, well, then it serves as a good heker. But somebody's, a beam that's supporting somebody's porch, it's certainly not obvious that it's there to remind you not to carry in Rosh Hashanah. And therefore, it won't work. So there's machlokes in Abaye and Rava regarding lechi omed me'elav. Abaye says that because it's like a mechitza, well, mechitza omed me'elav is fine, and therefore a lechi is fine. Whereas Rava says lechi is a different story. It's about heker, and if it's just there for some other purpose, it's not a good heker. Weiter. Tashma, come in here. Avnei gader hayotzos min hagader. If you have a wall of a building, right? So let's say you have the wall of this mavui. let's say you have one of the walls of the mavui, there are bricks that are sticking out, right? Avnei gader hayotzos min hagader. So part of this wall in the mavui has like these stones that are sticking out. Muvdalos zo mizo, pachos mishlosha, ein tzarich lechi acher. So if these stones that are sticking out of the mavui wall are within 3 tfachim of each other, well then that's fine. We'll say lavud and it's a good lechi. Shlosha tzarich lechi acher. But if there's more than 3 tfachim between these stones, well then you can't say lavud and you would need a new lechi. What does it sound like, Chaver? It sounds like these stones were just sticking out on their own. You didn't do it intentionally. They're just sticking out. And we're saying that as long as they're sticking out within 3 tfachim of each other, we could say lavud and say it's a good lechi. So it sounds like Abaye that lechi ha'omid me'elav is fine. Hachanami, you can answer shebenan mitchila l'chach, that you had initially put these bricks in this manner so that they will specifically be a lechi. Yachi pshita, if that's the case, then that's obvious. What's the chiddush? That we say lavud? Obviously we say lavud. We know we say lavud. Well, I may have thought that actually those stones aren't there, or somebody looking at it won't assume that those stones are there because it's a lechi. They'll assume that that's just part of the construction. That if you're going to want to add on to this wall later, well then you can only add on to the wall if you have existing kind of bricks or stones sticking out so that you can basically just easily make a continuation from the existing construction. But I wouldn't think that it's necessarily a lechi. So kamashmalan that it is a lechi, that it is a good lechi, even according to Rava. Tashma, the Tani Reb Chia, coming here, the Reb Chia taught. Now this is a brayso of Reb Chia that we saw in Tesamud Beis, with regard to nir mi bachutz v'shav mi bifnim, when you have a lechi that is visible from the outside but not visible from the inside, right? So we said kosel shetzido echad kanus mechavero. So if you have a wall and one part of the wall is more inward or outward than the other, whether this results in a situation where from the inside of the mavui it's flat, it's smooth, but from the outside you could see that there is a lechi, or whether this results in the fact that from the inside of the mavui you can see that there's a lechi, but from the outside you would not be able to tell that there's a lechi. Nidon mishum lechi, we can treat it as a lechi. So what do we see? Here also, it's a lechi omid me'elav. We're talking about a wall that just happens to have one part that's, thinner than the other part. So, or narrower than the other part. Hachanami, shasau mitchil l'chach. So here also, it's talking about where he made it. Rava will answer that, he made this lechi intentionally like this. Hiyachi mai kamashmalan. Well then what's the chiddush? He made a lechi. Mazel tov. So hakamashmalan nir mi b'chutz v'shav mi b'fnim nidon mishum lechi. No, it's a big chiddush. The chiddush is we had a humongous machlokas about do we say nidon nir mi b'chutz v'shav mi b'fnim is a good lechi or not. So what Rebbe Chia is teaching us is that it's a good lechi. Tashma kamanir d'Rava v'Yosef ba'u mavoa. Rav was sitting in a certain mavui. Hava Yosef Rav Huna kame, and Rav Huna is student. As we know from the Gemara in Shabbos and Daf Kuf Chaf Ches Amud Aleph, that Rav Huna was a student of Rav. So Rav Huna was sitting in front of Rav. Amar le Shamai. Now Rav said to his attendant, Zil aisi likuz demaya, please bring me some water. Ada asa nafal lechia. Now while the attendant was fetching the water, the lechi fell down. Ach v'lei biyadei kuma duchtech. So Rav signaled to his attendant, stop right there. Do not carry anything anymore. The lechi has fallen down. Amar le Rav Huna. Rav Huna then said to his Rebbe Rav, Lo sava lamar lismoch adikla. Why don't you just rely on the palm tree that's over there right by the entrance of the Mavui, and it's a Lechia Omid Me'elav, and we'll say that Lechia Omid Me'elav works. So, Omar Dami Ay Me'rabanon Kamandelo Parshe Inshe Shmaita. Wow. So, Rav said that this rabbi over here, referring to Rav Huna, sounds like somebody who has never been taught anything. Misamchinan Ale Me'esmol. Were we relying upon this palm tree from yesterday? No way, no how. Right? There was a lechi. Right? The point is there was a lechi and the lechi fell down. So when Shabbos started, there was a separate lechi. We weren't relying on that palm tree that was just there on its own. And therefore, when our dedicated lechi falls down, we do not just default and fall back on that tree that's memela over there in the corner at the opening of the mavui. So what do we see from the story? Time dilo samchinon. That what Rav is saying is that the reason why they couldn't rely upon this palm tree is because that wasn't our lechi when Shabbos started. Hasamchinon have lechi. But if it was our lechi when Shabbos started, if there was no dedicated lechi when Shabbos started, and we're just saying, hey, there's a palm tree here, let's just use this as our lechi, that would be fine. Like Abai is saying. Fine, okay. Now the Gemara wants to say, Lema Abai v'Rava b'delo samchinon ale plige. Let's say that Abai and Rava are actually arguing in a case where the lechi fell down, and Abai is saying that nonetheless, you could still fall back onto the lechi that was there already. But if when Shabbos started there was no dedicated lechi, even Rava would agree that it would work. But if it was, if when Shabbos started we were relying upon this thing that was already there, even Rava would say it works. Don't say that. Do not say that because there was this pillar from a porch that was by the house of Bar Chabu, and Abai and Rava would argue about this pillar, this beam all the time. So we see that exactly as the example that I've been sort of using for this Lechi Omid Me'elav throughout, right? Bar Chabu, he had this porch, and this porch was being supported by this Lechi, by this beam, and Abai and Rava would just always argue about whether that works or not, and clearly that beam was there when Shabbos started, and nonetheless, Rava would maintain that you cannot use it as a lechi. And the halacha is, like Abaye, that lechi ha'omid me'elav would be a good lechi. This is one of the 6 cases of Ya'al Kigam, where we paskin like Abaye and not Rava. New Mishnah. Bakol osin lechien afilu b'davar sheish baruch chaim. You can make a lechi out of anything. You can even use a live animal as a lechi. Rav Meir also, Rav Meir says you cannot use a live animal as a lechi. Okay? Now, if you use a live animal as the cover of a coffin, it becomes tameh. Rav Meir Matayr, Rav Meir says if you use a live animal as the cover of a coffin, it doesn't become tameh, it remains tahor. Okay? You could write a get, a divorce document on a live animal. Rabbi Yosef Aglili Poso, Rabbi Yosef Aglili says you may not write a divorce document on a live animal. Okay, interesting Mishnah, right? Says the Gemara, Tanya, we learn it by Rav Meir Omer. Says Rav Meir, Kol davar sheyesh bo ruach chayim, anything that is alive, ein osin oso, lo dofen l'sukkah, v'lo lechi l'mavui, lo pasen l'beiros, v'lo gola l'kever. So says Rav Meir that anything that is alive, you may not use it as a wall for a sukkah. You can't use it as a lechi for a mavui. You cannot use it as these diomdin, as these L-shaped corners for these wells in Rosh Hashanah for the people going to Jerusalem. V'lo golel la kever, and you may not use something that's alive as the covering of a coffin. All right. Mishum Rabbi Yosef Aglili Amru. They said the name of Rabbi Yosef Aglili Afin Kosvin Olav Gitei Nashim, and they said in the name of Rabbi Yosef Aglili that you also cannot write a divorce document on a live animal. My time with Rabbi Yosef Aglili. How come Rabbi Yosef Aglili says you can't write a divorce document on an animal? I mean, it sounds really fun. He doesn't want us to have fun? I don't know. Titania, as we learn in a brisa, Sefer, Eni ala Sefer. So we're learning a brisa. Well, here's a brisa from where we can learn Rabbi Yossi Aglili's opinion, which is that you cannot write a divorce document on an animal, even though it's really fun. As we learn in a brisa, sefer in the other sefer, that the pasuk says in the context of a get, it says right, v'chasav la sefer krisus, that he writes a sefer krisus. In the other sefer, well, it was a book, parchment. Minayin l'rabbos kol davar. How do we know that you can write a divorce document on anything? On mechvaisnish. If you want to write it on an eggshell, write it on an eggshell. I don't know. That he writes it for on anything. He's got to write it for. It doesn't matter what he writes it for. Well, then what's the whole point of sefer, which implies parchment? To say to you, just like a sefer is not alive and it's not food. So therefore you could write, so this Bryce is saying that you can write a divorce document on anything as long as it is not alive and as long as it's not food. I guess an eggshell could be okay. I don't know, eggshells aren't food. Eggs are food, but eggshells aren't. Anyways, so we see, so Rabbi Yossi Aglili learns out from Sefer that it's a divorce document can be written on anything from v'chasavla, and Sefer comes to exclude something that is alive or is food. V'Rabbanan, what about the rabbis who say that you are allowed to write a divorce document on a live animal? Miksiv ba Sefer, Sefer ksiv l'sviras devarim ba'alma. Doesn't say ba Sefer, doesn't say in the book. If it's in the book, so like that might be exclusionary to exclude live animals and food. However, it says Sefer, a book, meaning a recording, the Sfiras Devarim Ba'alma, just to record things in general. And therefore it can even be written on a live animal, and I guess probably also on food. As long as it's recording what we needed to record, which is that these people are getting divorced. So Sfiras Devarim Ba'alma Uda'asav, Rabbanan, Hai V'chasav L'Maidar Shebei. Well then what do the rabbis do with V'chasavla? Meaning, basically, they learn out everything from Sefer. Sefer, as long as it's something that records what you needed to record, that's fine. Okay, well, Rabbi Yossi Aglili, or at least that other Brisa was learning out from V'chasavla, that it can be written on anything. But the Rabbanan learned that out from Sefer. So, Ahumi Baile, B'chsiva Miskareshes, Vena Miskareshes B'kesef. So what the Rabbanan learn out from V'chasavla is that a man and a woman get divorced through writing, not through money. Because after I would have thought, since it says, where we compare Yitzia, the divorce, to Havaya, to the marriage, right? It says, V'yatza v'haisa, that she will go out and she will be, and then she can get remarried. So we compare divorce and marriage. Mahavaya b'kesef, afitzia b'kesef. I might thought that just like I can get married with money, I can get divorced with money. Kamash malan. So that is why it says, V'chasavla, that you actually have to write down the divorce document. You can't just give her money. Rabbi Yossi Aglili, Aisvar Minale. How does Rabbi Yossi Aglili know that you have to get divorced with writing and not with money? So nafkale mi sefer krisus, sefer korsa, vein davar acher korsa. So he says, well, it says sefer krisus, and he compares the juxtaposition of sefer to krisus, right? That it's the recording of things, it's writing things down that creates this divorce, not anything else, not money. V'Rabbanan, hai sefer krisus, mi baile l'davar hakoros beinu levena. What the rabbis do with sefer krisus is to say that in mamish has to be a clean break. L'chidetanya, as we learn in the Brisa, areza gitech amanas shelo tishti yain. If a man says to a woman, here is your divorce document, however, there are strings attached. There's a stipulation that you're now no longer allowed to drink any wine. Sorry. Amanas shelo telchi leveis avich leolam. Under the condition that you never visit your father again. Sorry. Ein ze krisus. Well, that's not going to work. It's not a clean break. It has to be a clean break. However, kol shloshim yom harei ze krisus. But if he says, look, here's your divorce document. You are divorced from this very moment. However, over the course of the next 30 days, do not drink wine, or do not go to your father's house. Well, it might be annoying, but nonetheless, it will work as a divorce document. And as Rashi points out, she's now divorced immediately, right? Under the condition that, she doesn't go to her father's house or doesn't drink wine for 30 days. Meaning both of these things only last for 30 days. And that would be enough to be considered a clean break, since there is an expiration to the condition. Rabbi Yosef Aglili, how does he know that it needs to be a clean break? Nafkale mikaris krisos. It could have just said sefer karis. Why does it say sefer krisus? That is why, that is how we learn it has to be a clean break. For Rabbanan, karis krisus lodarshe. The Rabbanan don't learn out anything from that karis krisus kind of thing. Okay, very nice. So there's machlokes between Rabbi Yossi Aglili and the Rabbanan, essentially about can you write a get on a live animal or not. The rabbis say yes, Rabbi Yossi Aglili says no. New Mishnah. Shayara, a caravan. If you had a whole bunch of wagons and stuff and they're traveling and stuff and they stop for Shabbos. Okay. Shechansa bebika, that they set up camp in an open field. V'kifua klei be'ema, and then they surrounded their encampment with animal kalim, saddles and things like that. So metaltlim b'socha, you can carry within this area that was surrounded by this equipment. As long as it creates a fence of 10 tfachim height. And you can't have paras mubala omed. You can't have more spaces than there is equipment. Any gap that is 10 amos or less is fine, because that's just an entrance. But if it's more than 10 amos, then that is a breach. This gap is now considered a breach. It's considered a pirza, and that is a problem. So we've learned 3 halachis about walls to enclose a rishus hayachid. One is that it must be 10 tefachim tall. The other is that the spaces cannot exceed the actual wall, the walled parts. And number 3, if there is any gap that is larger than 10 amos, that will be considered a pirza, which would invalidate carrying, which would prohibit carrying in this rishus hayachid. Says the Gemara, Itmar parutz k'omed. What if the gaps equal the standing wall? Let's say you have an amma of wall, amma gap, amma wall, amma gap, and this kind of continues around the entire area. Rav Papa Amar Mutter, Rav Huna Breder, Rav Yeshua Amar Aser. Rav Papa says that's fine. That's a good rishus hayachid. Rav Huna Breder, Rav Yeshua says that is a problem and you can't carry in that rishus hayachid. Rav Papa Amar Mutter Achi Agmer Rachmana L'Moshe Lo Tifrod Ruba. Rav Papa says that this rishus hayachid is absolutely fine because the halacha l'Moshe Misinai, as we learned in Daf Daled Amud Aleph, that mechitzos are halacha l'Moshe Misinai. Mechitza is in all the halachas, including Paras Muba Omed, is halacha l'Moshe Misinai. And Rav Papa is arguing that what the halacha l'Moshe Misinai is, that Vayhachi Agmer Rachmana L'Moshe, this is what God said to Moshe at Har Sinai. He said, Lo Tifrod Ruba. You shouldn't have more gap than wall. But if it's equal, that would be fine. Rav Huna Breder, Rav Yeshua Amar Aser. Rav Huna Breder, Rav Yeshua says you can't have equal parts gap and wall because Hachi Agmer Rachmana L'Moshe. This is what God said to Moshe. Gidor Ruba, you need to have more wall than space, but if it's equal, it won't work. Okay, I guess they're arguing about what God said to Moshe. I mean, it's hard to prove, I think, but that's the argument. Okay, I guess they had a tradition, but this is what God said to Moshe. Tanan v'lo yu pirtos yiseres ala binyan, hakabinyan mutter. The Gemara says, well, if we just look at the Mishnah says that you can't have more gap than wall, implying that if they're equal parts, then it should be fine. So if Rav Yeshua is going to respond, Lo tema hakibinyan mutter. Don't say no if they're equal, it's mutter. Ella ema im binyan yasser ala pirtza mutter. Rather say if there's more wall than there is gap, then it is mutter. Aval kibinyan mai aser. But if it's equal, then it's aser. Yachi, if that's the case, lesne lo yu pirtzos kibinyan. Kasha. The Gemara says, but if that's the case, then it shouldn't say in the Mishnah that there shouldn't be more gap than wall. It should say that there shouldn't be gap equal to wall. But it doesn't say it. It says dafka, there shouldn't be more gap than wall. Implying that if it's equal, then it should be fine. Kasha. There isn't really a good way to answer for Rav Huna Breder Rav Yeshua regarding that question. Tashma kamanira mekare sukaso b'shvudin o baruchos amita. Somebody who uses for schach, for his sukkah, he uses skewers, or he uses boards, sideboards from his bed. Now that is not good for schach because they're kalim, and kalim are makabel tuma. You can't be misakech with something that's makabel tuma. So these are not good. So you're basically using pasul schach. So yesh revach beneim kimosan kshera. But if there are, let's say this skewer is, 1 tefach wide, and then you have a tefach of schach. I don't know if that's necessarily a good example, but basically the point is, if you have the same equal spaces, pasul schach with kosher schach, so then it works. So what do we see? It sounds like Rav Papa, right? Where the assumption is that it would be the same halachos by walls. That the point being that you have equal spaces good and equal parts good, equal parts bad. And we're saying that what? That it works, right? As long as the parts are equal, that would be fine. So it would be kasher and Rafuna Breder of Yoshua, who says that by these walls, equal parts are pasul. So the Gemara answers for Rafuna Breder of Yoshua, achav ma'askinin kishenichnas v'yotze. So the Gemara says, yeah, but that's talking about where you can easily get in the schach, meaning we can easily put in the schach and take it out, i.e., there is more space that the schach consumes than the pasul stuff, right, which allows easy in and out for the kosher schach. So there actually is more kosher schach than there is pasul schach. Yeah, but that doesn't have to be the case. It could be that they're mamish the same exact size. Who says that it has to be that there's more space? So Amar Rabbi Ami b'maydif. Rabbi Ami says because that's how it was made. It was made, we're talking about where there was more space that it's easy to get the schach in and out. Okay? Rav Amar Mayu Nesunin Ariv Nosno Shisi Nosno Ariv. So what Rava says is that, well, if the pasul schach, if these skewers or if these side posts from beds were, choose one, horizontal, whichever way horizontal would be. So then what you would do is you would take the kosher schach and you put it vertical. The point being is that since you're going to be covering the whole sukkah with this with the perpendicular kosher schach, and they're going to be resting on the pasul schach, you're going to have all this kosher schach that is filling in the gaps, plus resting on top of the pasul schach, which means that it's going to be taking up more space and have more volume than the pasul schach, and that's why it would be acceptable. But it doesn't necessarily, So that is how Rafuna Breder of Yeshua would answer, to say that if they were equal parts, it would be a problem. But here it's not actually equal parts because there's more kosher schach than there is pasul schach. Alright, well that was Daf Tezvav of Masechta Ayruvin. Let us do a review about what we learned. So basically the entire first Amud concerned itself with the sugya of Lechi ha'omed me'elav, a lechi that stands on its own, that wasn't placed there to be a lechi, it was just kind of placed there, it was there already. So Abaye says it's kosher because a lechi is about being a mechitza. And we know that the halacha is that a mechitza ha'omed me'elav is acceptable. So therefore also a lechi ha'omed me'elav is acceptable. Rava says that you cannot use a lechi ha'omed me'elav because lechi is about a heker. And if it's just there on its own for some other purpose, it's not really a good heker to remind you not to carry in Rosh Hashanah. We talked about using a live animal as a lechi. So the Tanakama says no problem. Reb Meir says it is a problem. We talked about writing a get, a divorce document on a live animal. The Rabbanan said that would be permitted. Rabbi Yosef Glili said it is not permitted. The definition of a wall. So we learned in our latest Mishnah that a wall must be 10 tfachim tall. There must be more wall than there is gaps, and no one gap can be more than 10 amos. Otherwise, it's considered a pirza, and you cannot carry in this space. Now, what about a wall that has gaps that are equal? The size of the gaps are equal to the size of the wall. So Rav Papa says it's mutar. Rafuna Breder of Yeshua says it's aser. Chevra, that was Daf Tesvav. Hope you enjoyed, and hope you have a great day or night or whatever. Peace.